Wife reveals that she's pregnant, but I know I'm not the father because I'm sterile. So I play along. My wife, 33F, and I, 38M, have been married for 2 years, after dating for 3 years. She was more eager to tie the knot than I was, but I went along with it to please her. A year ago, she also pushed me to start trying for a baby, something that I wasn't very keen on either. But we had a lot of trouble conceiving, and it took a toll on my mental health. I decided to get myself checked, as my wife had become very nasty to me during our failed attempts. I couldn't handle her attitude anymore, but it was nothing compared to what I was about to face. A few days after the test, the doctors told me that I was infertile. That crushed me completely. Even though I didn't really want a baby at first, I had grown to love the idea of being a father, and I was looking forward to it. So, finding out that I would never have that chance was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but there was more to come. I was scared to tell my wife that I was the cause of our infertility, because I didn't know how she would react. She had already been so cruel to me that I feared her response when she would learn that her dream was impossible with me. So, I delayed telling her for a few days after I got the results, but she beat me to it. 4 days after I learned that I was infertile, she sat me down and said that she had some very important news for me, and I was terrified that she had somehow discovered my condition. But no, she wanted to tell me that she was finally pregnant. I was stunned beyond belief by what she said, but luckily, she didn't notice my true feelings and started to celebrate right away. I pretended to be happy with her so that she wouldn't suspect anything, but the next day, I got tested again to make sure that I was really and truly infertile, and the results were the same. I was clueless, because if I wasn't the father, then my wife had to be cheating on me. The medical treatments that she would need to get pregnant artificially were costly, and since I was the only one who worked between us, she would have to ask me for that kind of money first. So, she was clearly cheating. The thought was so bizarre and awful that I did nothing about it for the next few days, while my wife planned a big party to announce her pregnancy. She seemed very happy, and I was equally broken, but I hid it behind a smile because I wanted to figure out what was going on. I didn't even tell my own family about what was happening and kept it a secret because this was too awkward and personal to share with anyone. I didn't even tell my wife what I thought because firstly, it was too late, and secondly, I wanted to know who the father of her child was because if I confronted her, she might just leave and I would never find out. Luckily, I found out on the day of the party itself. A lot of people came, including our families, our friends, and some of my co-workers. She also invited one of our neighbors who lived right across from us. Our neighbor, 27M, is a young man and is definitely much more attractive than me, no doubt. Not just me, but he's probably more attractive than most people since he's a model, but he's still trying to make a name for himself in the modeling world. He moved in with his aunt, who owns the house he lives in, so that he's closer to the city since his own family lives far away. My wife always liked this guy and would make food for him and his aunt when he first moved in. He's come over to our house for dinner a few times, and we've talked about his work. He's articulate and well-educated, and he has the same literature degree as my wife, so they have a lot in common and got along really well the first time they met. I never had a problem with the guy since he seemed nice enough, and I trusted my wife too. But when he came into the house on the day of our party and my wife's eyes sparkled, I could feel that something was different. She ran to him as soon as he came in, and they hugged each other longer than she'd hugged any of the other guests. Nobody else seemed to notice this, but I did, and I could tell that they had something going on, but I just needed a way to prove it. So I decided to excuse myself to go to the bathroom, but went to the bedroom instead and opened up my wife's laptop. I've been able to check her phone while she was asleep a few days after she told me she was pregnant, but I hadn't found anything strange. Getting to her laptop had been a little harder since whenever I was home, she was always watching something or typing something on it. Whenever I'd ask her what she was doing, she'd turn the screen away from me and tell me that she was working on her novel. That had been happening for months, and I respected her privacy because I'd actually thought that she was working on a novel. Now, the situation had changed, and I was pretty sure that there was no novel, and it was just a cover to hide the contents of her laptop from me. Thankfully, there was no password or anything. I had easy access to it. After some searching, I was able to find another email account besides her real one. I switched to that one and went through the emails that had been sent and received. I went through those emails, and they were full of declarations of love from my wife and also the other guy, our neighbor. I recognized the email address since he was using his real name, and in the more recent emails, she was telling him that she was pregnant. He didn't take it well and was angry about it, so the mail stopped for a while, presumably because he wanted to break up, but my wife wasn't going to let him go. Eventually, I got the worst email of them all, where she was telling him that she'd talked to a friend of hers, who is a lawyer, and she'd help her file for divorce right after the baby is born. The reason she'd even tried to persuade me to have a baby with her was so that she'd get both the alimony and the child support after the divorce, so that she could run away with our neighbor a few months later and live happily ever after. I was appalled when I read that, and I can still feel the sickening feeling take over me whenever I think about that email. Anyway, I quickly shook off whatever I was feeling and got back to work and took several pictures of the email on my phone before shutting it down and keeping it back where I'd found it. I was more disgusted by what my wife was trying to do than the cheating. Cheating was one thing, but trying to trick me into having a child with her and then making me pay all that money just so she could finance her dream life with her struggling boyfriend was so twisted. And the icing on the cake was that she was such a good actor that I hadn't suspected a thing yet. Her happiness was almost creepy, but I was so furious about all of this that I decided to go the extra mile and take my revenge. I'd made up my mind to play along, and then I dropped the bomb on her when she was least expecting it. There was no way I was going to let her just get away with it without feeling the pain, betrayal, and anger that I'd been feeling when I found out about her deceit. Call me a psycho, but I did what I had to do. So, for the next 9 months, I acted like the perfect husband, father-to-be. It was hard knowing that she was lying to me all this time, but the more she lied and pretended to be happy with me, the more it motivated me to see this through. I went to every appointment with her doctor and made sure she took all her vitamins on time and was the best husband that one could hope for. Then, finally, a few days ago, my wife went into labor. I was very nervous because it wasn't normal in my situation, but I put that aside and took her to the hospital by myself. I'd called her parents already, but not mine, since I didn't want them there in case things got too dramatic. Anyway, her parents had to drive for an hour to get to the hospital, so we had some time to ourselves, and that's when I chose to drop the bomb on her. Once she was safely in the room, I told her that I was going to go out and call our neighbor so he could be here for her. She looked shocked and stuttered a bit while saying that there was no need for that and she didn't want a stranger in the room while giving birth. So, I smiled back at her and showed her the results of my fertility test, along with the divorce paper, since I'd filed for divorce just a few days before her due date that I'd made sure to bring with me on that day. She looked at all of it, still looking confused, so I explained to her that I couldn't impregnate her even if I'd wanted to, so the baby wasn't mine. Then, I told her about the emails that I'd found on her secret account, and at that moment, she finally understood what was going on. The look on her face was priceless as I walked out and she tried to come up with words. I thought I'd need to stay in the hospital myself too because that's how fast my heart was racing when I finally walked out and called our neighbor up to tell him that my wife was in labor. I didn't even wait for his reply and hung up as quickly as I could. Then, I got into my car and waited for my wife's family to show up. As soon as I saw her dad's car pull up in the driveway, I got out of there as quickly as I could. I even turned my phone off for good measure and drove for a while until I got to this motel a little out of town. I packed my bags already a few weeks ago and had them stashed in the trunk of my car so that I had everything I needed with me and wasn't caught off guard at any point. I spent the rest of the day watching television, drinking beer, and doing everything I possibly could to distract myself from things. I went to sleep that night quite peacefully, knowing that I was finally done with this whole act. The next morning, I woke up and finally turned my phone on. Naturally, there were hundreds of texts from my wife and my neighbor, none of which I bothered to even open, but I did go through some texts that my parents and brother had sent me. I guess my wife had probably contacted them when she couldn't reach me, so I decided to call my parents back and talk to them. I told them that I'd be coming back home in a while, and even told them to get my brother there if possible, so that I could explain the whole situation to them, because they deserved an explanation for what was happening. I drove to my parents' house, and my brother was already there, all of them looking confused and kind of annoyed, which was natural, because to them, I just missed the birth of my own child, and it also made them miss the birth of their grandchild. But I sat them down and explained the whole story to them and told them my reasons for what I'd done, and by the time I was done telling them, they were speechless. I was ready to be bombarded with questions and accusations, but nothing of the sort happened. All my dad said was that he hoped nothing worse would happen, and if the others had any other comments, they didn't say anything. So, everything was cool on that front. That was a few days ago, and while my family hasn't said much, my wife has gone overboard to accuse me of ruining her first time becoming a mother. She's been calling me and texting me ever since I left, but I haven't replied to anything. Even my neighbor texted me a few hours ago, saying that my wife was really sad and that we should put our differences aside for her sake, and at least try to work things out with her. For once, I can't believe the nerve that these people have, still trying to talk to me and make it seem like this is some trivial thing that I'm mad about. He mentioned a few other things as well in his text, like how my wife had started to fall in love with me again during her pregnancy, which had been a surprise for both of them as well. So I should at least try to give our marriage another chance. I called BS on it because if she'd started to fall for me again, then why was my neighbor still in the picture? I don't know why they think I'm that dumb. My wife is upset, but there's nothing I can do about it. She's mostly angry that I've known everything from the start, but had chosen to be with her and put up with this whole act and accused me of lying to her. Ida for staying with my wife throughout her pregnancy and deceiving her despite knowing that the baby wasn't mine, and she'd been cheating on me with our neighbor. Update 1. It's been almost a week since the baby was born, and I've been staying in a hotel room. I haven't been to see my wife yet, and I don't plan on going either. She's still calling and texting me, but I don't know why, since I've made it very clear that I'm not interested in talking to her or listening to her. I haven't blocked her yet, but I have blocked my neighbor since he'd taken it upon himself to text me and remind me that my wife was still hoping and wanted me to get back to her. I'm 100% sure that the only reason he's still with her and trying to get me to forgive her is so that she'll at least get something out of the divorce settlement and the alimony, since both of them are basically jobless. My wife was a stay-at-home spouse, which I appreciated and respected, but she wasn't just staying at home and doing the chores. She was also cheating on me behind my back, and that was unforgivable. And before anyone attacks me, I'm not the one who suggested that she quit her job after marriage. In fact, I was quite supportive of her back when we were dating, and she used to work, but she's the one who said she wanted to quit and take care of our home instead, so I didn't oppose it either since it was her choice, and I earned well enough anyway. I'm pretty sure my lawyer will be able to get me out of paying alimony once we can prove that she'd been cheating, which I'm hoping is going to be easy. As for my neighbor, he's still struggling to find well-paying modeling gigs, so managing his own expenses, my wife's expenses, and a baby on top of that is going to be impossible for them, even with all their money combined. So, good luck to them. I'm just thankful that I'm out of this mess and won't have to give them anything, not even my attention. I just hope that my wife realizes that and doesn't waste more of my time by contesting the divorce. I'm hoping she won't, but then again, given the utter lack of brains, she might as well, so I'm ready for that as well. The pictures of the emails that had been exchanged on her secret email account are still safely saved on my phone and backed up on my laptop, so I'm not too worried even if she decides to delete her account. She cannot delete those images that I have, and I know I'll be good to go. Worst comes to worst. I'll even pay her the alimony, but at least I won't have to be with her. She should count herself lucky. I'm letting her leave our house on her own and not having her kicked out since the house is in my name. I'm hoping for the best now, and maybe this will be over soon enough. Update 2. I was right. My wife's a moron and has decided to bargain since she wasn't satisfied with the settlement that I'd offered, which was basically just the amount that she'd spent during the marriage, and even that felt pretty generous to me. I don't even know what miracle she thinks is going to happen, but whatever. Good for her. She texted me yesterday saying that she'd left the house today, and I went back happily thinking that she'd probably moved in with her parents or something, but was very disappointed to find out that she just moved across the street into our neighbor's house, and I'd still have to see her and her boyfriend's faces every single day now. I even thought about going back to living in a hotel, but didn't, since this was my house, and I had every right to live wherever I wanted to. I wasn't going to pack up and leave just because they were going to make me uncomfortable. I did wonder why my wife hadn't gone to live with her parents instead, since living with our neighbor was going to hurt the divorce case, and she was just making the situation worse for herself. But I didn't have to think too hard because while scrolling through all the unread messages that I'd gotten from multiple people so far, I also noticed one from my wife's father. I hadn't replied to several people who had texted me in the past few days, and his message had also gotten lost in it. It was a long text about how sorry he was for what his daughter had done, and told me that they were strongly against her actions. Her father was saying these things, so it meant a lot to me and validated my emotions so much that I could feel tears coming on, but held back anyway. He apologized for my wife's behavior and told me that he'd cut her off since she told him that she wanted to contest the divorce. So far, nothing that my wife was doing made any sense to me at all, since everything that she'd done was going to backfire, and surely even someone like her had the common sense to realize that. Either she's just really dumb, or she still has some sick and twisted tricks up her sleeve. I'm hoping it's not the latter, but then I wouldn't put it past her. She is pretty much the worst. This living arrangement is definitely going to cause some problems, and I'm sure they'll try to make me uncomfortable or jealous, but I'm determined not to let them get to me and provoke me because they're definitely going to use that against me. All things considered, I'm still saving a lot of money since I don't have to live in a hotel. So, it's been a month since the negotiations for my divorce settlement started, and so far, it's going pretty poorly for my wife. I've been able to prove that she'd been cheating on me. Update 3. So, it's been a month since the negotiations for my divorce settlement started, and so far, it's going pretty poorly for my wife. I've been able to prove that she'd been cheating on me, and she'd even made my job easier by moving in with the guy I'd accused her of cheating on me with, so there was no doubt about the truth of my claims. She tried to make up some false accusations about how I was an alcoholic, which is also why I was infertile, and that's why she'd gone ahead and had an affair since when we were trying to conceive, I'd become really mean and bitter to her, but that was all disproved quite easily, since everyone knew I'd quit drinking last year when we decided to start trying for a baby and haven't touched alcohol since. Again, I don't know why she thought that would work, and it was pretty damn stupid on her part. I guess she was just clutching at straws, since her initial plan had failed terribly, and now she was too busy. Being a mother-to-be, a scheming mastermind, she was too busy, and her baby daddy was too dumb, so there they were. By now, both of us know that the chances of her walking away with any alimony at all are very slim, and I guess she must have told her boyfriend this since a few days ago. She was quite rudely kicked out of his house with her baby. Yeah, that's right. I heard a lot of yelling and screaming from their house, and then within minutes, I saw my wife and her son being pushed out of the house while the father shouted absolutely horrible things about her and called her every name in the book. I was watching all of this happen from my living room, and the second I saw him push my wife out while she was carrying the baby, I rushed out to help. Enmity be damned. I couldn't let a poor innocent baby suffer for something that isn't even his fault. By the time I got to his doorstep, he'd already slammed the door shut while my wife and her son were both crying. I carried the baby and grabbed my wife's hand so that I could lead them back to my house across the street, and then called my father-in-law up so that he could take her home. Within an hour, he showed up and took her away, once again thanking me for all that I'd done. During that 1 hour, my wife had been crying like a baby herself, so I'd basically been soothing both mother and child down myself. I wanted to call the cops as well, but she managed to convince me to let it go since she didn't want more trouble. She was apologizing over and over for whatever had happened, and told me that she'd been so desperate to be with the one she loved that she lost all her self-respect and morals, and she was truly sorry about all of it. She told me she'll accept whatever happens and isn't going to bargain anymore, so the divorce is finalized faster. I guess that's one good thing. I hope she decides to press charges eventually on this though, and heals herself as well. But at least I did whatever I could and was a decent person, and I don't regret anything.